Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, another day, another opportunity to take on the listeners. They've brought multiple questions for us to try to answer on a whole bunch of different topics, and we are going to do our very best to give you coherent and comprehensive answers to all of them.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
No,
whoa, whoa,
no.
whoa.
Am I over promising?
Well, yeah. We'll do no more than our darndest.
Fair enough. First one from @Perry Elias 08448. Will Ohio State be able to get out of the meandering they have gotten away with all season long? And we're assuming this is a question about the offense and, the offense sort of doing enough, but not necessarily all it's capable of. Is that fair?
That's the way I am reading that, Tom, to where you've got an Ohio State offense that has basically slow played the entire season, and now you've been slow playing the season for the playoffs. So now, do you continue to play this way because your defense is so good? You don't need a lot of points. You don't want to put your defense in a bad way. It cost them against Michigan last year when they did that. But this is not last year. And Tom, to me, if you've got a defense that is holding opponents to, 8 points a game, and if you choose to play aggressively on offense, it might force the defense to give up 17 points in an entire game. What's the downside? I don't think you need to shorten these games any longer. I think you can go ahead and attack and assume and know that your defense is going to hold up. Back in the day, Ryan Day said you needed 40 points to win in the playoffs. If he could just go like, in today's game, you need 30 points, because I don't think he even thinks you need 30 points anymore. I think he thinks 21 points will get it done, but that doesn't mean you need to shoot for 21 points. It's okay to know that 21 points will get it done and shoot for 35 and try to score on, 6 of your 9 possessions, because I don't know that you can even expect to have 10 possessions at this point any longer, unless you speed things up and you go tempo. And so then it gets back to the question of, after not doing much tempo this season, can you completely change and go more tempo and more possessions? And can your defense then handle being on the field more often? And so then, Tom, boy, that sure gets away from the routine, doesn't it?
It does, but I think the other side of this that you haven't really talked about yet is Ryan Day has now been the head coach at Ohio State for long enough that he has seen virtually every scenario sort of play out during his time in these big games, these postseason games, Michigan games, Big Ten championship games, whatever. Close and low scoring. The games where Ohio State is trying to, hang on to a lead, or they're trying to keep, the opponent is able to keep it close and low scoring. Ohio State's maybe trying to rely on their defense. Those have been a lot of the losses. Ryan Day just hasn't lost that many football games, but 2019 against Clemson, played it a little bit conservatively, tried to lean on the defense. And there's a lot of other stuff that went into the way that game ended. But, they sort of tried to play it a little conservative, tried to sit on a lead, ended up losing. That's one. You go back through the 2022 Peach Bowl. Again, Ohio State, that was not a conservative Ohio State game plan by any means, but they had a lead. And then Marvin Harrison goes down with an injury, and then they're not able to hold the lead, and the defense gives up a couple big scores, and then they miss the field goal at the end. And, you've seen a couple Ohio State seasons end with the, real devastating late game, close game, probably had an opportunity to put this game away earlier and weren't able to. 2023 up at Michigan, what happens? Well, they have the ball late. They aren't able to, they're not able to get off the field on defense. They have the ball late with a chance to win, and the ball's in Michigan territory, and they throw the interception. There's been a lot of those like real close call kind of things, and they just had one in Indianapolis and against Indiana just a week or so ago. So again, close, late. Michigan game last year, close, late, and you were, we've got a great defense. We'll just lean on the defense. You've got a great offense too. Like, you can just try and you've got to sort of be able to bet on your offense to beat their defense more often than not. Because, Ohio State probably would win more games than not by scoring 17 points. Ohio State's going to win virtually every game they play if they score 31 points. So, I don't think they need to score 40. This is not, some of those like iffy Ohio State defenses of the past. If Ohio State can score 31, 35 points, and don't know that there's a team in the field that I look at and go, they absolutely cannot get to that point against that team. Like, it's going to be a challenge to get to that point against Texas Tech or Indiana, probably, maybe Oregon. But there are teams that, there are lots of teams that they could get to 30 points against. They could get to 30 points against Texas A&M. They could get to 30 points against Miami. If you've looked at Georgia's stats in terms of sacks and passing yards allowed per pass, they could get there against Georgia. So, they just have to decide how aggressive they're going to want to be. I look at the track record there. I think Ryan Day is probably keenly aware of the track record there and is probably looking at that and thinking, like, a little more, you just be a little more aggressive, just as a treat, and don't completely rely on the defense.
I think losing to Indiana in that manner, we've now heard Ryan Day start talking about something he has mentioned last year, which is leave no doubt. And when you play it close like that, you are bringing in the ability for doubt to decide this. And so I think the pain, the reminder, basically through that Indiana loss is it shouldn't come down to one play, and it shouldn't come down to missing a field goal. It shouldn't come down to Julian saying slipping. And so the best way to leave no doubt and to keep it from coming down to one play is to be aggressive and unleash the offense and swing away. All of these coaching cliches that he has mentioned when they want to be aggressive, follow your own advice, I guess, is what I would say there. And you recruited Jeremiah Smith and you signed Julian Sayin for a reason, and go make the best use of him that you can.
Well, and I think another piece of this is Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are only going to get healthier, unless they have a setback of some kind. They're only going to get healthier. Those are guys who were banged up against Michigan. They were not 100% against Michigan. They were, presumably in better shape for the Indiana game, but still were not 100%. Still, Carnell Tate had not played in a number of weeks, so probably a little bit of just sort of getting back up to game speed, getting back up to, the conditioning to run 40 yards downfield and then come back and then do it again and do it again. That's a challenge. I think having the few weeks now to sort of continue to heal up, continue to, get yourself back on track, all of that is going to help them potentially being a little more aggressive moving forward in the playoff. Next one from @RR_Buckeye Vet. Who do you think puts their name in the transfer portal come January? And I will reiterate our position that, we're not going to look and go, this guy should leave. Like, that's not really our position right now. I think it's fair to talk about sort of some broad strokes, and you can apply that, and you can figure out if there are names that you think apply to any of these guys who have lost their jobs to people who are coming back, guys who have been here for, entering their third year, and like, you're not seeing them on the two deep, though that tends to be offensive linemen. It's really guys who are in their fourth year and who aren't anywhere near the two deep, or guys who have gotten passed up by people behind them on the depth chart. That's the kind of thing that I'm generally looking at in terms of thinking, who might not be here next year. If you are if you're in your third year at Ohio State and there is there's a guy who is on the second, who's with the twos, who's a redshirt freshman or a sophomore or something like that, and he's ahead of you on the depth chart, that would be this is not the place for you kind of thing. And I honestly can tell you, I have not given this a lot of thought yet in terms of who might be in the playoff or who might be in the portal in a couple weeks, because we have a lot of other stuff we're trying to think about right now. But it is that generally is sort of broadly, and you may have other thoughts, but generally sort of some of the broad strokes of the types of players that tend to enter the portal.
Yeah, we talk about this every year about we're not trying to put people in the portal. We don't like to speculate on it. The game has kind of changed over the course of those talking points that we try to give every year. And so you can look at, any quarterback, you look at Keenan Olds. Is he going to go? Because this is a question that he's going to face when we talk to them for the bowl games and to get his thoughts. And he can go back to talking to Joe Burrow about these things, talking to Tate Martell about these things. and you may get two different answers that end up being the same exact truth. Where yes, I have to consider my options, or no, I'm not going anywhere. Both of those guys hit the portal, and that's just the nature of the game. In terms of, there's also the guys that are backups who could go make money as starters. That is now a new factor in all of this. So even guys that have a good spot or are a play away from a good spot, they are going to be enticed and or try to be enticed to hit the portal. Their agents will have numbers. It's not like they'll need to talk with anybody. The agents are all out there. There's no tampering as long as you're just talking to agents. Nobody's talking to players. Generally, the agents are just out there floating in the ether. You can just talk to a wall and somehow it's hitting the agent. And so there's also that, which is the case anywhere. But yes, it used to be much easier. The guys that were here for 3 years and not playing probably going to hit the portal. Now it's like, well, just it may be a little bit different than that moving forward with all of the numbers. And then Ohio State has to decide how close do you want to pay a backup that is going to make starter money elsewhere. And so those kind of factors can get into play here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Zen Maholski last year for Ohio State, where he came in after the injury to Josh Simmons, played against Nebraska. It didn't go well. And then really, you didn't really see him on the field after that. And then he was at Indiana this year and was not really starting for them, but was kind of their sixth offensive lineman. And he started for them in the Big Ten championship game and didn't go great for him. I mean, you saw a lot of Caden Curry earlier in that game. And then all of a sudden you didn't see Zen Maholski out there anymore. But you can have some real financial opportunity in the portal if someone is looking for an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman or whatever position you play. Someone is looking for that, and the Ohio State logo next to your headshot in the portal is probably makes you a little bit appealing because it's very explainable that well, I wasn't starting there, but I mean, look how good they are. So think about how good I could be for you. And so, yeah, that is certainly a complicating factor there. Next one from @TermanEater13. Could Ryan Day allow Brian Hartline to call plays in the Cotton Bowl, then take over play calling duties for the rest of the playoff? Not dismiss Hartline completely like Saban did with Kiffin, mostly because January 2nd, the portal opens, which increases Hartline's time needed for USF.
Ryan Day did say Brian Hartline is going to call plays during the playoffs, but also did say basically they will continue to evaluate how things are going later on this month and further on beyond that, because I think it's a very good point here where I think it's okay to point to Brian Hartline's distractions and say like that probably didn't help Ohio State against Indiana. So you're going to want to eliminate those distractions as much as you can in the next games, but also you've got more time to deal with it. And that was a very compacted, congested period of time where Brian Hartline was interviewing and then named and then going and signing and accepting. And now you can spread all of this USF, OSU stuff out over the course of time. And he'll be in Columbus. I think he may be about back, although with the way the weather is right now, he might be holding off just a little bit further in Tampa, just a couple more days, and then I'll be back this, later in the week. But they'll have a better plan in place on how to move forward, because the plan they had in place last week was the best of a bad situation, or they presume it was the best of a bad situation. I don't know if it was actually the best.
Well, and the other thing is, it wasn't just Brian Hartline who had to leave. Like Ohio State was dealing with some of the recruiting class fallout of Brian Hartline leaving, and that chewed up a bunch of times. And so, and chewed up a lot of attention and chewed up a lot of everything. And, now that is at least behind them. And then January 2nd, everyone is, you can say, well, Ryan Day has to worry about the portal. I mean, Ryan Day has Mark Pantoni to worry about that kind of stuff and sort of oversee. They've got a whole team of people looking at folks in the portal and all that kind of stuff. every program is worrying about that at that point. So that's not a unique disadvantage as it was in the week before the Big Ten championship game. So yeah, I don't think this is going to be an issue, but we'll see. Ryan Day sort of left the door open. I'm not expecting it, but Ryan Day sort of left the door open there where, maybe. So, all right, last one from @Mr_Plow. What would be the ideal path for the Buckeyes in the playoffs? So this one, I actually did a series of shows, did 2 morning shows on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast feed, ranking the 11 teams in terms of which one presented the biggest challenge, just sort of looking statistically in terms of profile. Every March they talk about the NCAA tournament. It's just all about matchups. Well, where are the teams that present maybe matchup challenges for Ohio State? And so among the teams, I'm looking at teams with really good defense. This is kind of the Indiana profile. Who fits the Indiana profile where they've got a very good defense, they've got a pass rush that can really get there, they have at least a decent pass defense on a yards per play basis. You're not going to be able to just completely run over them, in terms of rushing the ball, and their offense is at least decent. That they're not a completely lifeless offense with a really good defense attached. And I think the 5 teams in order that I had as these are the teams that are going to present the biggest challenges to Ohio State. Number 1, Indiana. Number 2, Texas Tech. Number 3, Oregon. Number 4, wait for it, Miami. Number 5, Georgia. Georgia's defense, 109th in the nation in sacks and real unimpressive in terms of yards per pass allowed. They've had some real issues with getting beat over the top in the passing game. So Georgia's obviously a more talented team than a number of the teams ranked ahead of them, but just in terms of matchups, I don't think they're that phenomenal. So, in terms of an ideal path through the playoff for Ohio State, Texas A&M is 6th on that list, and they're good, but they're not phenomenal. And they're another team that has a defense that's their defense is 57th in yards per rush allowed, 19th in yards per pass allowed, 1st in sacks. That's the only thing that would really be a concern there. But they're the 21st ranked SP plus defense. And so if the pass rush isn't getting there, they're cooked. They're in big trouble. The pass rush could get there, but not. So you'd probably prefer to play Texas A&M in your quarterfinal. You'd love for Georgia to lose. If you could somehow get Ole Miss in there, we'll be realistic and acknowledge that Tulane is not going to win 2 games, but if you could get Ole Miss in there instead of Georgia, that would be great. And then from the other side of the bracket, the top 3 teams that I mentioned are all from the other side of the bracket. So, if you're going to get, you've got Indiana over there, you've got Oregon over there, you've got Texas Tech over there. So, you'd love for an Oklahoma or an Alabama to get through. I hate to spoil the surprise. That's probably not going to happen, but you'd probably love, of the 3 realistic teams from that side of the bracket, I think you'd probably prefer Oregon to the other 2. Texas Tech is better than you think. Texas Tech is 2nd in SP plus in offense, 4th in SP plus in defense, which is basically the inverse of Indiana. Indiana's 4th on offense, 2nd on defense. And both of them, they're tied for 5th in the nation in sacks per game. So those are 2 teams that profile very similarly. And, you have seen what an Indiana team can do to Ohio State on a neutral field. And so, I think those are going to be the ones that would be the biggest challenge. So I guess you'd prefer to face Oregon if the more unrealistic options are not realistic.
Tom, I'm flummoxed. I have nothing to add other than I wish I could have said something that was in disagreement with anything you said there. Unfortunately, I can't, and so you must be correct about all of this. I do agree with you. The Texas Tech defense is their pass rush and the defensive line. They've paid good money for a good team, and I don't know if enough people are talking about that the way they did Ohio State's $23 million roster or whatever last year. I don't know if they're calling this a $40 million roster. I forget the numbers. But I do fully believe Ohio State would love to see Indiana again, just based on the way things went and the emotions of a little bit of revenge and getting them locked in. But they'll be locked in regardless of the opponent if they make it that far. but I do think some Ohio State players would be rooting for Indiana, and then of course Indiana fans would be, just be careful what you be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. And yeah, I think that's going to be a relatively low scoring bracket. The top half of this bracket, where other than Oregon probably running through James Madison, perhaps like everything else is going to be. Tulane Ole Miss might be a bit of a shootout, but like once you get into the quarters, yeah, I don't foresee a ton of scoring going on up there. But again, looking forward to all of it. It is almost here. It is almost upon us, and we will be all of us will be very much in tune to what is going on watching this as we prepare for Ohio State's next opponent, which will be either Miami or Texas A&M. Tom says you should prefer Texas A&M, just so you know.
What?
He is afraid. He is terrified of the Miami. He feels like you should be terrified of Miami's defensive line and their fan base. And I would agree about the second part. Frankly, on some of these comments from the one Miami rewatch that we did, where throughout the entire show, we're saying, this is the only time we've seen Miami. This is just the first of a rewatch series. And then half of the comments are like, these guys have not watched much Miami. Like, yeah, it was one game. We said it's one game. And they're like, they don't know half these players. They don't even know if this guy's out. How could I? It's one game. Anyway, neither here nor there. Thank you, Miami fans, for tuning in. And thank you for the comments as well. But of course, thank you for all you guys tuning in. If you want to hit the thumbs up, we'd appreciate that. 5-star rating and review on the podcast platforms. Also appreciate it. And you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up, say hello to us there on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. That will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.